Welcome to BL Stories, where romance, drama, and unforgettable boys' love come to life. Love knows no limits, and the best stories aren't always straight. Subscribe now and join our growing BL-loving family. Chapter 28. Nico, can you turn that awful music down so I can concentrate? I grumbled from the passenger seat. Nico chuckled but turned the volume down a notch before reaching over to pinch my cheek. Without looking up from my phone, I puffed out my cheeks, pushing his hand away. My friend, who I might have gotten a little too close with, just laughed and pulled over to the curb as cars passed us lazily. Made any progress? Nico asked, leaning over the center console curiously. Nope, I sighed, sinking into the seat. I removed my glasses and rubbed my tired eyes. Classes had been miserable. Everyone's stares felt like burning questions I couldn't answer. Sophia had completely ignored me in the hallway, and Parker hadn't hesitated to give me his trademark death glare. I regretted what I said to Sophia, but I didn't regret standing my ground. Maybe I could have said it better, but in that moment, anger had clouded everything. If I hadn't let it out, I might have exploded. I had planned to take the train home after Sophia's, dragging my feet the whole way. But instead, I nearly got run over, literally, when Nico pulled up in front of the school after skipping his last class for a nap. He had scolded me for walking so absent-mindedly, but when he saw my downcast face, his expression softened. He took my hand gently and led me into the car without another word. He hadn't said much since then, just occasional glances my way, and I told him I was fine, even though we both knew I wasn't. So, there I was, staring at my phone, trying to write an apology text to Sophia. Talking in person would be better, sure. Even calling would have been braver. I was scared. Scared of losing control again. Scared she'd cry, and I wouldn't know what to do. Texting was safer. At least through words, I could be sincere. But writing an apology that didn't sound empty was harder than I thought. I'd been stuck on the same screen for the entire car ride home. It's just a text, Wes, Nico teased. Not an essay. Not listening to someone who gets DS on their English essays, I shot back. Nico just hummed and lit a cigarette, cracking the window slightly. His free hand drummed softly on my forearm, a quiet reminder that he was there. After 5 more minutes of agony, I finally hit send. Sophia, 4:14 p.m. Hey Sophia. I just wanted to apologize for what I said earlier today. I wasn't thinking clearly, and I'm sorry. If you want to talk, I'm here. Oh no, there's a typo. I sighed, reaching to fix it. Nico plucked the phone from my hand before I could type another word. At least for the rest of the ride home, could you relax, Wes? He said, his blue eyes glinting. I frowned but nodded, sinking back into my seat. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught Nico's soft, content smile, and somehow my muscles relaxed. When he reached over and linked his fingers with mine, I didn't resist. The drive suddenly felt shorter than I wanted it to be. When Nico pulled up in front of my house, he handed my phone back and smiled. Then, quietly and quickly, he leaned in and pressed a light kiss against my lips. The tinted windows made the world outside disappear for a moment. I'll pick you up for school tomorrow, he said matter-of-factly. Sure, I managed to reply, my voice barely above a whisper. As I stepped out, my heart raced so hard it was almost embarrassing. I waited until I heard his car drive away before glancing out the window, catching a glimpse of his car turning the corner. Realizing what I was doing, grinning like some hopeless romantic, I shook my head and slapped my cheeks. Relax, relax, I muttered to myself. My phone buzzed. My pulse jumped. Sophia? Benny, 4:37 p.m. Hey man, just wanted to say, I'm here if you need to talk. Benny, 4:42 p.m. As a friend, you know, if you're going through something, I got your back. What an idiot, I muttered with a small smile. Benny was never the sentimental type. He'd rather joke his way out of awkwardness than say something heartfelt, but his clumsy words still warmed my chest. They were honest. Honest in a way I hadn't been lately. 2 weeks later. Still no reply? Nico's voice came through the phone. I sighed. Nope. "Don't worry so much, Wes," he said. "You did your part. If she's still upset, that's on her." "Easy for you to say," I mumbled. "You're not friends with her." "Maybe it's better that you're not," he replied, his tone a little sharper than usual. I blinked. "Are you jealous, Mr. Beckett?" I teased, even though I knew he wasn't. Nico Beckett didn't get jealous. "Sure I am," he said lightly. I couldn't tell if he meant it, and that tiny uncertainty twisted something inside me. "Shouldn't you be heading out soon?" I asked. "Yeah," he said after a pause. "See you this weekend." When the call ended, the silence in my room felt heavier than before. At first, I'd been thankful for the space Sophia gave me. But as days turned into weeks, her silence began to sting. She still avoided eye contact at school, and Parker's glare hadn't softened either. I tried to shrug it off, but it started affecting my sleep. Benny noticed, of course. He tried to cheer me up with his usual goofy energy. It helped, when he was around. But when I was alone, my thoughts drifted back to Sophia and to Nico. I spent most afternoons at Nico's place now. We didn't talk much. Sometimes he'd nap while I studied at his desk. The first time I saw his usually messy desk cleared just for me, my chest tightened. It was such a small gesture, yet it meant more than I could admit. In his room, surrounded by his things, his scent, his presence, there was a small space for me. It made me wonder, foolishly, if there could ever be more. But I pushed that thought away. Even as we talked, laughed, and shared quiet moments, I never forgot who he was, and who I wasn't. I didn't know what we were, or how long this fragile connection would last. The thought of it ending made my stomach twist. With a groan, I flopped face first onto my pillow. I didn't even hear Jamie enter until she leapt onto my bed, laughing as she started tickling me. "Jamie, stop!" I yelped, rolling off the mattress and landing on the floor in a tangled heap. For the first time in weeks, I actually laughed. And somehow, it made everything feel just a little lighter. "Jamie!" I shouted, picking myself up from the floor and glaring at my sister, who was grinning proudly from where she sat on my bed. "Good. You've still got some energy left in you," she said, her smile widening. "Come on, Wes. You've been acting like a zombie all week." Mom's worried. Since she's been busy with work, she asked me to check on her little brother. "Jamie, please don't start," I said, waving off her concern with a half-hearted smile. "I'm fine. Really. Completely fine." "You're really, completely, totally not fine," Jamie countered, hopping up from the bed and looping her arm through mine. I tried to pull away, but her grip only tightened. "See? Definitely not fine." "Can you not?" I muttered, exhaling in defeat as she finally released me. Jamie hummed, ignoring my protest as she rummaged through my closet. "Now, put these on," she said, tossing clothes in my direction. "I don't know what's bothering you, but we're going out. You look so gloomy, it's bringing me down." I glanced at her in disbelief. "What do you mean, going out? Like, going out to pick up takeout? Because that's not really going out." Jamie rolled her eyes as I pulled on the hoodie she'd thrown me. I looked up and froze. Unlike her usual messy self, Jamie was dressed up, tight jeans, a crisp white V-neck, and a leather jacket. Even her hair, normally a frizzy bun, was loose and shiny around her shoulders. She actually looked decent. "Oh wow," I said, raising an eyebrow. "You're serious? You're not even wearing pajamas." Jamie snorted. "Okay, that was rude. But I'll forgive you. Now come on, it's Friday night, my exams are over, and we're going bowling. We haven't done that in ages. Oh, and we're getting dinner first. I'm craving steak." Before I could object, Jamie had already pulled me toward the car and sped off, nearly clipping another vehicle on the way. For once, my thoughts about Sophia and my confusing situation with Nico took a back seat to the more immediate concern of surviving Jamie's driving. Jamie really did know how to get my mind off things. Watching my sister eat was an experience. I sat there, steak knife in hand, resisting the urge to either hand her a napkin or just wipe the gravy off her cheek myself. "You're such a slob," I sighed, cutting my steak neatly. "Dad would definitely scold you for eating like that." Jamie rolled her eyes but didn't slow down. Yeah, probably, she said, her tone light but distant. But he's not here, so I'm going to eat however I want, cool? I shrugged, used to her carefree attitude. When is Dad coming back anyway? I asked after a moment. She paused, fork halfway to her mouth. No idea, she said simply. You don't miss him? He's been gone for months. Wasn't he supposed to be back last weekend? Jamie chewed thoughtfully before replying. Not really. He's gone so often that I guess I just got used to it. I didn't have the heart to press her further, especially after she reached across the table, speared a piece of my steak, and popped it into her mouth with a satisfied hum. I sighed, glancing around to make sure no one noticed her antics, only to spot a waiter discreetly sneaking glances at her from behind the counter. Poor guy, I thought. If only he knew what kind of chaos she really was. Ah, that hit the spot, Jamie said cheerfully, wiping her mouth. She gave me a questioning look, and I nodded that I was done. She paid for both of us before I could even protest, barely noticing the flustered waiter handing her the change. With her arms slung around my shoulders, she guided me out of the restaurant like a proud older sibling on a mission. The bowling alley wasn't far, and Jamie, shockingly, managed to park straight this time. Stepping inside, I was hit by a wave of nostalgia. The place had changed a bit since Dad used to bring us here when we were younger. The bricks were freshly painted, the neon lights less flickery, but it still smelled faintly of old wood, soda, and popcorn. It felt familiar, comforting. Jamie seemed right at home too. She slipped into a pair of worn rental shoes that looked like they'd survived a war, grinning as she picked up a bowling ball. So, she said mischievously, want to make this interesting? I smirked. Sure. If I win, you do my bathroom duty for a week. Jamie groaned but held out her pinky. Fine. But if I win, you tell me where you've been sneaking off to lately, and why you've been coming home all smiley and distracted. It. I stammered, face heating up. That's not fair. Too late, she sang, hooking her pinky with mine and giving it 2 firm shakes. A bet's a bet. I seriously regret having you as a sister, I muttered, though the corners of my mouth twitched despite myself. Jamie laughed and took her shot. Her first ball veered wildly to the left, knocking down only 2 pins. I grinned, until her second roll cleared the rest. Better start practicing your storytelling, she said, smirking at my stunned face. Because tonight, I'm hearing everything. Not if I can help it, I said quickly, grabbing my ball as she went to order snacks. Coke and 2 servings of fries, both for her. I managed a decent spare, and the game continued in a blur of laughter, teasing, and lighthearted competition. By the 5th round, the score was close. For the first time in weeks, I felt relaxed, actually happy. Then Jamie slipped, landed flat on her back, and sent her ball rolling lazily into the gutter. I couldn't hold it in. I burst out laughing, tears stinging my eyes. Don't laugh at me, Jamie yelled, but even she was smiling. She pinched my side playfully before picking up another ball and muttering what I could only assume was a pep talk to it. And that's when I heard it. Wes. I turned at the sound of my name and froze. Standing a few feet away was Nico, looking just as surprised to see me. His blue eyes met mine, uncertain but warm. Before either of us could say anything, one of his friends playfully punched his shoulder, pushing him slightly forward. I recognized them instantly, upperclassmen from school, all part of Nico's old circle. A loud whistle echoed from behind them. My stomach dropped as I realized one of the guys was eyeing Timmy. She tilted her head, confused. You know these guys, Wes? I opened my mouth, but no words came out. At this point, I didn't need to lose the bet for my secret to be in danger. Just my luck. Chapter 29. Oh no. No, 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 no. The words repeated in my mind like a warning siren. Just my luck. I froze when Nico's brows furrowed, his gaze shifting between me and my sister before flicking toward his friends. The concern in his expression deepened when his eyes returned to mine. Wes. Jamie nudged my side, sensing my unease. Do you know them? Yeah. They're upperclassmen from my school, I stammered, my voice rough. I didn't really know them well, though. My hands fidgeted restlessly, twisting together like damp cloth. Jamie hummed, clearly unimpressed. Probably a good thing, she muttered under her breath, noticing the way a few of the guys were staring at her. She pulled her hair forward over her chest and straightened her back, refusing to show discomfort. Despite the stares and whispered remarks, Jamie didn't flinch. She simply ignored them, her chin raised in quiet defiance. Among Nico's friends, I recognized two faces. One was Colin Jennings, a tall, broad-shouldered guy who practically lived at the gym. He wasn't particularly bright, but he was harmless, more interested in his next protein shake than in starting trouble. Despite his size, Colin had an easygoing nature and rarely picked fights, probably because he couldn't be bothered to. The other was Isaac Masters, someone I'd always gone out of my way to avoid back in school. He had a reputation, charming on the surface, but cold underneath. He was known as a flirt and a troublemaker, and though Nico had once shared that reputation, Isaac's edge was sharper, his temper quicker. He was attractive, sure, but his eyes were too cold, his smile too thin. Isaac had always been Nico's closest friend, and apparently still was. And I didn't like that. Because the Nico I'd come to know, the one who stayed up late talking to me, who made pasta in my kitchen, who held me close in quiet moments, felt miles away from the one standing beside Isaac now. Seeing him there reminded me that there were sides of Nico I didn't fully understand. The kind, gentle side I'd grown close to wasn't all there was. And the part one saw now scared me. That fear only grew when Isaac's attention shifted to Jamie. His lips curled upward, one corner of his mouth tilting into a mocking smirk as his gaze swept over her. Jamie noticed instantly. Her lips pressed into a line. "Ugh," she muttered under her breath, giving me a pointed look. Isaac stepped closer, his heavy cologne filling the air. "You look bored," he said, glancing at me briefly before focusing back on Jamie. "Want to ditch your boyfriend and come with us? I could show you a better time." Jamie's expression hardened, though her tone stayed calm. "I'm fine, thanks." Isaac only chuckled. "Don't be like that," he said smoothly, reaching for her wrist. "Come on. You don't need to hang around this little guy." Jamie pulled her arm back immediately, glaring. "Excuse me? Let go," she snapped, shaking his hand off like it burned. She turned toward me, grabbing my hand. "We're leaving," she said firmly. I nodded without hesitation. But before we could take 2 steps, Isaac's hand shot out again, gripping Jamie's shoulder and yanking her back. "Did you think you could just walk away after talking to me like that?" he hissed, his fake smile widening even as his eyes darkened. Jamie's jaw tightened. For the first time that night, she looked unsure, her usual confidence faltering. My pulse thundered. Without thinking, I grabbed her waist and pulled her behind me. "Don't touch my sister," I shouted, my voice cracking slightly. Isaac's smirk returned. "Sister, huh?" he sneered. "Could have fooled me. You sure you're not into her yourself?" Laughter rippled through his group. My face flushed, but I stood my ground. "I'm not interested in my own sister," I said through gritted teeth. "And she's definitely not interested in you." Jamie tugged on the back of my shirt, whispering urgently, "Wes, stop." But it was too late. Isaac's expression shifted in an instant. The smirk vanished, replaced by a flash of anger. His fist came up fast, and I barely had time to lift my arms before the punch landed squarely against my forearm. Pain shot through me like fire. I stumbled backward and fell hard, my leg slamming against the bowling ball return with a thud. My arm throbbed, but my leg screamed in pain, a sharp, burning ache that made it hard to breathe. "Hey!" The shout cut through the noise, loud enough to silence the alley. There was a crash, followed by a series of grunts and gasps. Strong hands gripped my shoulders, and Jamie's voice broke through the ringing in my ears, shaky, desperate. "Wes, are you okay?" I opened my eyes and froze at what I saw. The source of the crash was clear now. Nico stood over Isaac, his hand fisted in Isaac's collar, his expression dark and furious. The rest of Isaac's friends stood frozen in shock as the echo of the impact still hung in the air. For the first time since I'd known him, Nico didn't look gentle. He looked dangerous. Isaac was sprawled on the floor, one hand clutching his jaw, eyes wide with disbelief. Standing over him was Nico, tall, tense, and furious. His knuckles were red, his jaw set tight, and his chest heaved with anger. His boot pressed lightly against Isaac's shoulder, holding him down like a man restraining something dangerous. The silver ring on his lip caught the light, glinting sharply as his expression hardened. His blue eyes burned, colder than fire, sharper than the pain throbbing in my leg. Isaac finally snapped out of his shock and shoved Nico's foot away, scrambling up and grabbing the front of Nico's shirt. Nico didn't fight back at first. He only stared, his hands trembling with barely contained rage. "What is wrong with you, Nico?" Isaac barked. "What's wrong with me?" Nico's voice was low but dangerous. He caught Isaac's wrist in one swift motion, his grip firm. "You threw the first punch and now you're asking me what's wrong?" Isaac flinched as Nico's fingers tightened, but before he could respond, Nico drove his knee into Isaac's stomach. The air left Isaac's lungs in a painful gasp, and he dropped to the ground again, winded and stunned. They had been best friends once. Nico had never hit him before, never even raised his voice. But tonight, something in him had snapped. Isaac coughed, pushing himself up again, anger flashing in his eyes. "Unbelievable. You disappear every weekend, then show up acting like some kind of saint. Since when did you start caring about things like this?" Nico didn't flinch. "Since I realized what kind of people I was hanging out with." Isaac scoffed, his lips twisting into a sneer. "You've changed, Nico. You used to be fun. Now you're just..." He didn't get to finish. Nico moved before the words were out, driving a punch straight into Isaac's stomach again. The same spot as before. Isaac doubled over instantly, falling to the floor for the third time. "Make that 3, Nico muttered under his breath, shaking out his hand. He turned toward the group that had been watching in silence. "You guys invited me out, but I think we're done for the night." No one argued. The group shifted awkwardly before moving to help Isaac, who groaned in pain and waved them off irritably. Only Colin hesitated, giving Nico an uneasy glance before finally walking over to Isaac, not to help him, but to snap a few photos on his phone, a faint grin tugging at his face. "Wes, are you okay?" Jamie's voice pulled me back to reality. Her hands hovered frantically over me, checking my arms, shoulders, and sides. "I was okay before you started poking me," I muttered, wincing as she pressed on my sore arm. Jamie ignored my complaints and crouched beside me, carefully rolling up the hem of my pants. The moment she did, pain shot up my leg like lightning. Her frown deepened. "That's not good. It's swollen, probably a bad sprain, maybe worse. You might need an X-ray." I nodded weakly, not arguing. My leg felt like it was on fire. Jamie helped me up, wrapping an arm around my waist so I could lean on her for support. We started limping toward the car park, each step heavier than the last. Then I felt it, a familiar warmth at my back. "Wes." The voice was quiet, steady, and unmistakably Nico's. The contrast between the fury I'd seen moments ago and the gentleness in his tone now made my chest tighten. I turned slightly, leaning more on Jamie as she froze beside me. Her expression darkened the instant she saw him. "Hey, Nico," I said softly, forcing a small smile even as I winced from the pain in my leg. Nico's eyes dropped immediately to my injury. The skin above my ankle was visibly red and swollen. His expression shifted from anger to worry. "Wes, are you sure you're okay?" he asked, stepping closer and reaching out to steady me. But before he could, Jamie moved in front of me, blocking him. "He's not okay," she said sharply. "And your friends are the reason why." "I know," Nico said quietly. His voice carried no defensiveness, no excuses, just sincerity. His eyes met mine, full of regret. His hand trembled slightly, still half extended, as if unsure whether he was allowed to help. "I'm sorry," he said again. I opened my mouth. "It's okay." "It's not okay." Jamie cut me off, glaring at both of us. "You got hurt, Wes. You could have been seriously injured. And you," she turned on Nico, "you need to take your violence and your awful friends somewhere else. Stay away from my brother." "Jamie," I began, but she silenced me with a sharp look and a firm pinch on my arm. Come on, she said, her tone softening just slightly. Let's go home. Mom needs to look at that leg. I let her half carry me toward the car, my weight heavy against her shoulder. Still, I couldn't help glancing back. Nico stood there under the flickering parking lot light, his expression quiet and full of remorse. Our eyes met briefly, his, full of apology, mine, full of something I couldn't quite name. I gave him a faint, tired smile. And he returned it, small, sad, and genuine. Chapter 30. My injured leg dangled off the edge of the chair, feeling heavy and swollen beneath the tight bandages. When I got home last night, Mum immediately sprang from the couch and pressed a bag of frozen peas onto my throbbing ankle. Being a nurse, she knew what to do. She took one look at the swelling and quickly wrapped it up, reminding me to stay off it for a few days. The pain had eased a little by morning, but the skin was still bruised and hot to the touch. As I quietly nibbled my toast, our dog Jojo brushed against my bandaged foot with a soft whine. Her sad eyes made me smile faintly, and I reached down to pat her head. Her low rumble of contentment eased my thoughts for a brief moment, until I remembered Jamie's words from last night. After Mum sent me to bed, Jamie came in to talk, though it was less of a conversation and more of a one-sided lecture. She wanted to know all about the people from the bowling alley, especially Nico. My sister didn't hold back her opinions. To be fair, I couldn't really blame her. Isaac wasn't exactly the kind of guy anyone would want around. Jamie's rant lasted several minutes, something about questionable friends and poor influences. I nodded along at first, agreeing out of habit. But then her frustration shifted focus to Nico. She started with his tattoos, calling them filthy and gangster-like. I bit my tongue, hiding the urge to defend him. Sure, I'd thought the same thing once, but now those dark designs felt familiar, comforting even. Then came his piercings. She said they looked unprofessional, the kind that would stop him from getting a real job. I stayed silent again, though my lips pressed into a thin line. I actually liked his lip ring. It suited him, his face, his personality. And when he smiled, my cheeks grew warm at the thought, and Jamie mistook my blush for anger, thinking I shared her disgust. That only encouraged her to go on, her voice rising with each sentence. Then she called him violent, a thug. That was the point I had to bite down on my lip to keep from saying something I'd regret. She didn't understand. Yes, he'd fought Isaac, but she hadn't seen the whole picture. Nico wasn't the type to hurt people for no reason. He was the type to protect the people he cared about, even when it meant being misunderstood. That was the Nico Beckett I knew, the one who treated me gently, who cooked pasta and planned little picnics. The one who worked hard for his family and looked after his grandmother. That was the Nico I'd grown to care for. When Jamie opened her mouth to say more, I quickly claimed I was tired and hid under my blanket, hoping she'd take the hint. Thankfully, she did. She gave my good leg a gentle pat and left the room. The moment she closed the door, I grabbed my phone and called Nico. Just hearing his deep, familiar "huss" was enough to make every worry fade away. We didn't talk about the fight, or Isaac, or Jamie. We just talked about simple things until I fell asleep with the phone still pressed to my ear. When I woke up and saw the call had lasted long after I drifted off, I smiled. But Jamie's words still lingered, stirring doubts I didn't want to feel. After finishing breakfast, I got ready for school as best as I could. Luckily, Mum still had a pair of crutches from when Jamie sprained her ankle years ago. I wasn't very graceful with them, but at least I could move. As I hobbled to the porch, I stopped short. A familiar car was parked at the curb, and a tall figure leaned casually against it, smoke curling into the air. He dropped his cigarette when he saw me, crushing it under his shoe with a quick step before flashing that crooked grin of his. "Nico? What are you doing here?" I asked, awkwardly maneuvering my crutches toward him. His smile faded a little when he saw me struggling. Without a word, he reached out and gently lifted my bag off my shoulder, easily holding it with one hand. Then his other arm slipped around my waist, pulling me close in a hug. Out in broad daylight, my face burned red. "Hey, we're outside," I whispered nervously. Nico just chuckled softly. "Just for a second. Please." His voice dropped low, warm against my hair. For a brief moment, I let myself relax into him, breathing in the scent of smoke and something faintly sweet that always clung to him. After a while, he released me and gave a small, almost sad smile before helping me into the car. Once I was settled, he tossed my crutches and bag in the back seat. The faint smell of tobacco filled the air, stronger than usual. Nico had been trying to cut down, at least around me, so the scent made me wonder if something was bothering him. The drive was quiet. He only spoke when I asked questions, short replies, polite but distant. By the time we hit the halfway point, the silence was so thick that I couldn't take it anymore. "Are you upset about something?" I asked cautiously. When Nico's grip on the steering wheel tightened, I added, "If it's the smoking, I don't mind. I mean, as long as the window's open." He sighed, still looking straight ahead. My stomach twisted with nerves. Then, without warning, he turned down a quiet side street near school, parked, and switched off the radio. The silence that followed felt heavy. Before I could say anything, he unbuckled his seatbelt and leaned toward me. I froze, but instead of saying anything, Nico simply wrapped his arms around me, holding me close. His hand brushed through my hair while the other rested gently on my back, tracing small circles. "Nico," I whispered, my voice barely audible. He'd never held me quite like this, carefully as if I might break. "I'm sorry," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "For what happened? For letting things go that far. I should have stopped Isaac before anyone got hurt." I followed his gaze to my ankle, still wrapped in white bandages, and let out a small laugh. "It looks worse than it is. I'll be fine soon." He didn't look convinced, but I smiled anyway, placing my arms around him in return. "Really? And you don't need to apologize, Nico. You didn't do anything wrong. You were standing up for me." Nico finally smiled, a small, weary one. "I'm not sure Isaac and I are friends anymore." That made me laugh softly. But when his smile faded again, replaced by hesitation, I felt a pang in my chest. "Wes," he said quietly, eyes flicking away, "I was worried you might think less of me after seeing me like that." I reached up and cupped his face, gently turning him toward me. "Nico," I said firmly, smiling, "I could never think less of you. Only more." For a moment, he just looked at me, those bright blue eyes softening, uncertain. Then he leaned in and kissed me lightly, his lips curling into a small smile against mine. "Thanks, Wes," he whispered. Chapter 31. After spending a few quiet moments together in his car, talking about how Jamie wasn't exactly fond of him, which made Nico frown until I assured him I didn't feel the same way, he finally drove me the rest of the way to school. He parked in one of the spaces closest to the entrance, right in plain view of everyone passing by. I could feel the curious stares of other students as we got out, but I was too focused on managing my crutches without tripping to care. When I reached for my backpack, Nico just shook his head and brushed my hand away, easily lifting it himself. With one arm holding my bag and the other steadying me, he helped me up the steps and down the hall. Thanks to him, it didn't take me nearly as long to reach my locker as it would have on my own. I tried to take my books from him, but he refused, giving me one of his warning looks that made it clear I wouldn't win this argument. So, I sighed and let him carry everything, even though we were heading to different classes. Not that Nico seemed to plan on attending his. "People are going to start weird rumors again, you know," I muttered, wobbling slightly as we walked side by side. Heads turned as we passed, whispers following us down the hallway. "They'll probably say something ridiculous about you carrying my books." Nico gave me a calm, curious look. "What kind of rumors? You haven't heard them?" I asked in disbelief. "I don't really care for rumors," he replied simply, shrugging. I couldn't help but laugh. "Well, some people think I'm your assistant, running errands and buying cigarettes for you. Another one says you initiated me into your gang." Nico snorted, shaking his head with a grin. "A gang? I'd pay to see that." "There's one more," I said mischievously. "People think you make me do your homework because you're failing." He rolled his eyes. "That one's definitely not true." "Oh really?" I teased. "Because I distinctly remember a certain biology project." "Hey, I recall letting you use my place for that project, Nico interrupted. Not to mention my wardrobe. My top shelf smelled like beans for days after. I burst out laughing, almost losing my balance on my crutches. Yeah, okay, Nico admitted with a chuckle. Maybe that last one's a little true. Ah, so honest, I said in mock admiration, using the same tone he often teased me with. We were still laughing when we reached my classroom. Nico was about to follow me inside when Benny came sprinting down the hall, calling out my name. Wes, wait up. Benny skidded to a stop as he saw Nico beside me, his eyes going wide. After a hesitant pause, he managed a nervous smile. Hey, Nico, Benny said, his voice shaking slightly. I'll take Wes's books from you. Without waiting for an answer, he grabbed the stack from Nico's hands. Wow, these are heavy. Thanks, Benny, Nico said with a small laugh. Benny blinked in surprise, then cleared his throat. Right. Anyway, come on, we're almost late. I grinned. Yeah. See you later, Nico? Nico nodded, the corner of his lips curving upward as he watched me go. By lunchtime, the atmosphere at our table felt heavy, tense enough to make breathing feel awkward. Rachel sat stiffly at the end of the table, pretending to read a book she hadn't turned a page of in 15 minutes. Leo was poking at his food like it had personally offended him. Benny kept nervously scrolling through his phone, and Parker was glaring at me as if waiting for me to say something. Across from me, Sophia sat quietly, eyes darting around, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. No one spoke. The silence stretched until Parker finally slammed his hands on the table and stood up. Wes, don't you have something to say? He demanded. I looked up, calm despite his frustration. Say what? His face turned bright red, his jaw tight. I knew what this was about. He wanted me to apologize for what happened with Sophia. But I wasn't the one who owed an apology. Before Parker could continue, Sophia suddenly stood up, her cheeks flushed. W's, she said loudly, cutting him off. Can I talk to you? Alone. I hesitated. Talking to Sophia lately felt like wading through quicksand, everything exhausting and repetitive. But with everyone's eyes on us, I sighed and nodded, following her out toward the empty patio near the outdoor tables. Once we were out of earshot, she fiddled nervously with the end of her braid. I glanced at my watch, lunch was slipping away, and I knew Nico was probably waiting for me near the pool shed. So, what did you want to talk about? I asked, trying not to sound impatient. Sophia took a shaky breath. I just wanted to apologize. I didn't realize you and Nico were close. I shouldn't have said what I did. I nodded lightly. All right. I didn't mean to hurt you, she added quickly, wringing her hands. I really don't want this to ruin our friendship. I studied her face, her wide, hopeful eyes, and felt nothing but weariness. Sophia, I began gently but firmly. She interrupted, her voice cracking. Actually, I just remembered, I have a meeting. Sophia, can we? Sorry, Wes, but I've got to go. My family's leaving for the holidays, but I'll message you, okay? I'll see you next term, she said hurriedly before rushing off, her voice fading as she disappeared back into the building. I stood there, stunned for a moment, then sighed and made my way toward the pool shed. The familiar smell of chlorine greeted me, washing away some of the tension twisting in my chest. When I opened the door, Nico was already there, sitting cross-legged on the floor, a relaxed smile on his face. He lifted a hand, motioning for me to come over. Without a word, I hobbled toward him and settled beside him, leaning against his chest. He chuckled softly as I let out an exhausted sigh. Rough day? Something like that, I murmured. Want to talk about it? He asked. Maybe later, I said, closing my eyes as I rested against him. I just want to stay like this for a minute. Nico smiled, wrapping his arms around me in a gentle hug. So honest today, Wes. Just stay quiet and hug me, I mumbled. He laughed softly. Yes, sir. And as his arms tightened around me, the world outside, its noise, rumors, and tension, faded away. Here, with him, everything felt right. Chapter 32. The holidays had started, and honestly, I was bored. Utterly, painfully bored. I'd already finished most of my homework and spent a few days hanging out with Benny before he and his family jetted off somewhere tropical for the break. My house, meanwhile, was as quiet and uneventful as ever. Jamie's school break hadn't begun yet, and she was locked in her room studying for her mid-semester exams. She'd been so on edge that Mum and I couldn't even walk past her door without hearing her shout about the noise. Mum was busy too, working long hours and coming home tired. When she did, she barely had the energy to cook dinner, much less plan family outings. At first, I didn't mind. Staying home felt nice. I could watch movies, play games, and read books. It was peaceful. For a few days, I thought maybe a quiet break was exactly what I needed. But then the silence began to drag. Something was missing. Or rather, someone. Since the start of the holidays, Nico had picked up extra shifts. He was working nights at the bar as usual, but now he also spent his days helping out at a car repair shop owned by one of his relatives. Because of that, I hadn't seen him in nearly a week. It doesn't sound long, but when you're used to seeing someone almost every day, a few days apart feels like forever. I sighed, rubbing my face and trying to focus on my desk full of worksheets. Maybe if I buried myself in homework, I could distract my mind. It worked for about 5 minutes. Then my thoughts started drifting again. I wonder what Nico's doing right now. I shook my head quickly, forcing my eyes back to the page. Focus, Wes, I muttered to myself. Focus. A few more equations later, my mind wandered again. Did he have lunch yet? I groaned quietly, setting my pencil down and slumping back in my chair. It was hopeless. Lately, Nico had been slipping into my thoughts at random. Whether I saw a car like his or passed by someone with tattoos that almost, but not quite, resembled his. Sometimes, I didn't even need a reason. He just appeared in my mind, uninvited but not unwelcome. It was annoying. And more than that, it was frustrating. I miss him. I stared at my homework, the formulas swimming uselessly in front of my eyes. Finally, I stood up, grabbing my jacket off the chair. I'm going to see him, I said aloud, as if saying it would make it more reasonable. After scrolling through our old messages, smiling at the little jokes we'd exchanged, I found the name of the garage he worked at. It wasn't too far, but not close either, about a 45-minute walk. With my crutches, that was impossible, so I decided to take the bus. The trip wasn't ideal. The walk to the stop left my arms sore from the crutches, and I had to pause once to catch my breath. When the bus finally came, I climbed aboard and sat near the front, resting my crutches beside me. My leg ached, but my excitement overrode the discomfort. By the time I reached the shop, the air smelled faintly of rubber and engine oil. The bell above the door chimed softly as I stepped inside. Afternoon, love. The voice came from a cheerful woman behind the counter. She was short and round, with curly hair tied up in a loose bun and a smile that lit up her whole face. What brings you in today? Car trouble? She asked, bouncing slightly on her toes to see over the desk. Oh, no, I said awkwardly, rubbing the back of my neck. I don't actually have a car. Her eyebrows lifted. Then are you here for a service appointment? I shook my head again, laughing a little. Not that either. I'm just here to see a friend. Nico. The woman's expression instantly brightened. Her eyes twinkled as she clapped her hands together. Oh, so you're him, she said excitedly. You're the one Nico keeps mentioning. Oh, he wasn't exaggerating, you really are adorable. I froze, blinking in confusion. Wait, he talks about me? All the time, she said with a grin. I'm Shelley. My husband owns this place. He's Nico's uncle on his dad's side. My face warmed. Nico talks about me to his family? Somehow, that thought didn't make me embarrassed, it made me strangely happy. Shelley chuckled, covering her mouth. Oh, sorry. My husband says I talk too much. I can't keep secrets to save my life. It's fine, I said quickly, trying not to sound as flustered as I felt. Is Nico around? If he's busy, I can wait. No problem, she said brightly. As his boss, I can extend his break a little, especially for a visitor. She winked before heading toward the back door, keys jingling from her neck. Come on, you came just in time. His break just started. I smiled gratefully and followed her toward the garage entrance. Just then, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Pulling it out, I couldn't help the grin spreading across my face when I saw the name on the screen. Nico Beckett, 4:31 p.m. Hey, I'm on my break. You free to talk? I chuckled quietly to myself. Sometimes, it felt like Nico could read my mind. As Shelley led me toward the back, I thought about how often he crossed my mind, and wondered if, maybe, I crossed his too. Maybe when he woke up in the morning he thought to check his phone, hoping I'd messaged him first. Maybe something during his day would remind him of me, the same way he seemed to slip into my thoughts no matter how much I tried to focus. It was silly, maybe even hopeful. But when he sent messages like that, simple, thoughtful, perfectly timed, it made me believe that maybe, just maybe, he missed me too. Wesley Dillon, 4:31 p.m. Wes, nope, busy. He sent the message and barely had time to exhale twice before the familiar 3 dots appeared, blinking beneath his text. Then they vanished, replaced by a gray message bubble. Nico Beckett, 4:32 p.m. Nico, with what? Wes didn't reply. Shelley was already leading him deeper into the garage, where the smell of metal and rubber filled the air. It wasn't exactly pleasant, but it wasn't terrible either. Nico sometimes smelled faintly like this, mixed with the clean scent of shampoo and a trace of tobacco. He should be over there, Shelley said, pointing to a small enclosed room with plastic curtains pulled across it. Thanks, Shelley. She waved a hand dismissively. No, thank you. Nicholas has been so cheerful lately, and it's obviously because of you. We're all really happy about that. Wes flushed, startled. So cute. Shelley added with a laugh. He said you blush easily, and wow, he was right. I really don't. Wes stammered, which only made Shelley laugh harder as she patted his back. Sure, kiddo. Anyway, have fun. Don't worry about his break time. Nico's been working so hard lately, he deserves it. Tell him not to rush for me, okay? Got it. Thanks again, Wes said. As Shelley walked back toward the reception area, Wes's phone vibrated again. Nico Beckett, 4:33 p.m. Nico, Wes? You okay? Where are you? Smiling, Wes tucked his phone away and pushed open the door. I'm here, he called playfully. Nico's head snapped up. For a moment, his eyes widened in disbelief before his whole face broke into a grin. He stood quickly, his dark blue work clothes stained with oil and his forearms glistening with effort. Wes, he exclaimed, crossing the room in seconds and pulling him into a hug. Wes wrinkled his nose. You smell like motor oil, he teased, but his tone was warm. Nico chuckled, ruffling Wes's hair. What are you doing here, huh? Missed me that much? Someone's been picking up too many shifts, Wes said, pretending to pout. It's like you're avoiding me. Nico's grin faltered, guilt flickering in his eyes. Wes quickly softened, smiling up at him. I'm kidding. I do miss you. A little. Maybe. Nico's smirk returned. Before Wes could say anything else, a deep voice came from the doorway. Hey, Nico, do you know where the... Oh. They both turned. Colin Jennings stood there, filling the doorway. In one hand he held a massive sandwich, in the other, a 2-liter bottle of water. His surprised gaze darted between Nico and Wes. Wes froze. Colin Jennings? Nico's friend Colin? He immediately stepped back, feeling his face grow warm. Wait, Colin said slowly, tilting his head. So, the person you've been talking about is him? Nico replied, clearly amused. Wes's heart raced. He wasn't ready for this, for anyone to know. Until now, what he had with Nico existed in quiet moments, away from the world's eyes. It was something private, something safe. But now that Colin had seen them together, Wes's mind spiraled. What if the story spread? What if everyone knew? And Nico, he stammered. Colin's frown shifted into something almost goofy. Oh, so you're the one. I should have guessed. Man, I remember that time Nico got into it with Isaac. Now it makes sense. He was just being protective. Are you okay, by the way? That fall looked pretty bad. Nico laughed quietly at Wes's stunned expression and stepped closer, wrapping his arms loosely around Wes's waist again. "Wes, this is Colin." "Colin, this is Wes," Nico said, grinning. Wes turned bright red. You've been talking about me?" Shelley said something and now Colin. Colin nodded thoughtfully. He wasn't lying. "You do blush a lot." Wes groaned and tapped Nico's leg with his crutch in protest. "You're unbelievable, Nico Beckett." Nico winced playfully. I deserve that." Before Wes could scold him again, Nico leaned forward and pressed a quick kiss to his forehead, silencing him. Wes froze, his face burning as Colin raised a brow. "Don't mind me," Colin said with a lazy grin. "I'll just finish my lunch and get out of your way." Nico chuckled and looked back at Wes. His tone softened. "I'm really glad you came, Wes," he murmured. "I've missed you." Wes felt the tension drain from his shoulders as he smiled faintly. "I missed you too." Chapter 33. Colin was busy adjusting his hair in the small mirror hanging inside his locker when I leaned against the wall near Nico's. Nico was pulling off his work clothes and hanging them neatly inside, his movements smooth and unhurried. I swallowed hard, trying not to stare. The faint scent of his aftershave mixed with the lingering smell of engine oil, and it was oddly comforting. Noticing my gaze, Nico tilted his head slightly, his eyes flicking over to mine. A knowing grin tugged at his lips when he caught the color rising in my cheeks. With a quiet chuckle, he swung his locker door open wider, blocking Colin's view, and gently pulled me closer for a quick kiss. I squeaked in surprise, half-heartedly swatting at his chest, which only made him laugh. When he finally let me go, his eyes were still dancing with amusement. "Looking a little red there, Wes," Nico teased, his playful tone making my heart skip. "You okay?" "Perfectly fine," I said, crossing my arms in a poor attempt at looking composed. Nico closed his locker with a loud metallic clank, then turned toward Colin. "See you later, man," he said casually. Colin glanced over, one hand still smoothing his freshly gelled hair while the other held an apple halfway to his mouth. "You're not coming? We're having pre-drinks at my place before heading into town, remember?" I blinked. Pre-drinks? Nico hadn't mentioned he had plans. A small knot formed in my stomach. Maybe I'd just assumed he'd spend the evening with me. Then again, he was Nico Beckett, and I was just Wesley Dillon. Maybe I was getting ahead of myself. I kept my expression neutral and stared down at my shoes. "Nah," Nico said finally, reaching for my hand. "I think I'll take Wes home." "Oh," I stammered, glancing up at him. "If you already have plans, it's fine. I can take the bus." My hand slipped from his, and I forced a nervous laugh. "Don't worry about me. Wesley could come with us," Colin suggested. "The guys won't mind. Isaac might grumble, but he won't do anything if we're there." He grinned, showing a slightly crooked tooth. The mention of Isaac made my leg throb a little more. "Thanks for the offer, Colin, really, but I think I'll just go home." I tugged lightly on the hem of Nico's shirt and smiled. "Go have fun with your friends. I'll message you later." Nico studied my face for a long moment before letting out a sigh. Then, without warning, he bent down and, "What? Nico?" I yelped as he suddenly lifted me and tossed me over his shoulder. My crutches wobbled in the air as I dangled helplessly, staring at the back of his shirt. Colin froze mid-bite, watching us with wide eyes. "Maybe next time, Colin," Nico said, his tone cheerful. "Wes and I are just going to take it easy tonight." Sure, man," Colin said, breaking into a grin. "See you both. Don't let Nico push you around too much, Wes." "I'm not being pushed around," I shouted from over Nico's shoulder, though it didn't sound convincing. Nico carried me out of the building and toward his car. I squirmed the whole way. Nico put me down. "I can walk." "Wes, stop moving," he said between laughs. "You're going to make me drop you." "Good," I retorted. "I'd rather you drop me than keep embarrassing me like this." That only made him laugh harder. The sound was rich and genuine, echoing through the empty lot. Even upside down, I could tell his whole face had lit up with that easy smile of his, the one that always melted my frustration no matter how hard I tried to stay mad. Alright, Nico said finally, still chuckling. You really don't make this easy, you know that? Maybe I'm not supposed to, I grumbled, though I couldn't help the small smile tugging at my lips. As we reached the car, Nico finally set me down gently on my feet, steadying me with both hands. His expression softened. Sorry, he said quietly, his voice more sincere now. I just didn't want to leave you alone tonight. The tension in my chest eased. You're impossible, you know that? Yeah, he said with a grin, opening the passenger door for me. But you keep showing up anyway. Despite myself, I laughed. You're lucky I do. No, I said slowly, glaring at Nico as I tapped his back with my crutch. He finally helped me into the passenger seat of his car, still laughing under his breath. Careful, he teased, pinching my cheek before walking around to the driver's side. I crossed my arms and stared out the window, trying to ignore the warmth in my face. The drive was quiet after that. After a few turns, my irritation faded, replaced by that familiar calm that always seemed to settle around Nico. When he noticed I wasn't fuming anymore, his hand moved across the center console. Without a word, he slipped his fingers between mine and rested our joined hands on my lap. My lips twitched upward. He caught the tiny smile and hummed in satisfaction. So, I began, tracing the outlines of the tattoos on his forearm with my free hand. Nico's eyes stayed on the road, but the faint smile on his lips deepened. What's the plan now? He glanced at the car clock. Dinner first. I nodded, feeling butterflies flutter in my stomach. Sounds good. Where are we eating? Well, he said, eyes glinting with mischief, I've got a few ingredients at home. I could cook for us. My face lit up. Pasta? Nico laughed softly and squeezed my hand. If that's what you want. As the car slowed to a stop at a red light, he turned toward me with that look, the one that always made my heart race. Leaning closer, he kissed me gently. It took me a second to react, but when I did, he smiled against my lips. And for dessert, he murmured teasingly, I think I'll leave that up to you. My jaw dropped, and I lightly smacked his shoulder. You're impossible. Hey, he said with a grin, no distracting the driver. I groaned but couldn't help laughing. The rest of the drive passed in comfortable silence. When we arrived at his house, I texted my mom that I'd be staying at a friend's place. She was probably still at work, so I doubted she'd see it soon. I sent the same message to my sister, who replied with a teasing question about Sophia. Rolling my eyes, I put my phone away and tried to ignore the strange heaviness in my chest. Suddenly, I was craving something sweet, something to wash away that bitter taste. I sighed in contentment, sprawled across Nico's couch, my hand rubbing my full stomach. That was amazing, I muttered. Nico chuckled as he took our empty plates to the kitchen. Glad you liked it? He rinsed the dishes, then wiped his hands and walked back over. Without warning, he leaned over me, bracing himself with his knees on either side of my legs and gently taking my wrists, resting them above my head. His touch wasn't forceful, just soft and playful. You look very comfortable, he said, peering down with a smirk. I replied lazily. But I think I ate too much. You're trying to overfeed me again, aren't you? Planning something sinister? You caught me, he said with mock seriousness. What should I do now that you've discovered my master plan? You should let me go, I said dramatically, pretending to plead. Please. Nico stifled a laugh and pressed a kiss to my cheek. Now, why would I do that? You'd tell everyone my secret. I turned my face to the side, and he rested his forehead against mine. His breath was warm, his presence comforting. He smiled faintly. Maybe I should just keep you here so you don't run away. His tone was teasing, but something about the way he said it made my heart skip. His arms around me felt safe, too safe. For a moment, the world outside that small living room didn't exist. He looked at me with that gentle expression again, his eyes full of warmth. His every gesture was careful, patient. I could almost believe he cared about me, really cared, but he never said the words. Not once. I loved him, but deep down I feared that for Nico, this might just be a passing moment, something fleeting. And when that moment ended, I didn't want to think about what came next. If only I could make him stay, keep him here beside me for months, years, maybe forever. Instead, I smiled and wrapped my arms around his neck, pulling him close once more. And for now, I decided that would be enough. To simply enjoy it, while it lasts. Chapter 34. You're hanging out with Benny today, right? Nico asked, his voice trailing into a yawn. I couldn't help but laugh softly at how tired he sounded through the phone. Yeah, I said, leaning over the bathroom sink to spit out toothpaste. After rinsing and washing my face, I ran a hand through my hair to tame it before getting dressed. Nico had worked the night shift at the bar, so he was exhausted. Still, he'd managed to call me as soon as I woke up. Just remembering the sound of his sleepy voice made my stomach tighten in that warm, familiar way. You should go back to sleep, Nico, I said gently. He mumbled something I couldn't quite catch, the sound of sheets rustling faintly through the phone. He sighed, his voice low and relaxed. Just hearing him breathe made my face heat up. Have fun with Benny, Wes. I'll see you later. Yeah, see you later, I replied softly before hanging up. As much as I wanted to spend the whole day with Nico, I had been unintentionally neglecting Benny. Usually during school breaks, Benny would show up at my door without warning, dragging me out for snacks or games. But this time, he'd only texted once to make plans. It wasn't like him at all. I tried not to worry, but something in the back of my mind told me something was different. It didn't take long to reach Benny's place by bus. As always, his front door was unlocked. I stepped inside, closed it behind me, and headed upstairs without knocking. Benny! The sight that greeted me made me freeze. His room looked like a small tornado had hit it, clothes everywhere, and Benny himself was half buried under a pile of laundry. Throw anything that smells like it hasn't been washed since last year in there, Benny said, tossing a large bag at me. Before I could respond, a suspiciously damp t-shirt came flying toward my face. I barely dodged it. Did you seriously invite me over to help you with chores? I asked, shaking the laundry bag. Of course not, Benny said with a grin. I just thought we could spend some quality time together. It's not my fault cleaning is involved. I sighed. I hate you. And I love you too, he sang dramatically. I threw a pair of jeans at him in response. Gross. He laughed, though his smile faltered for just a second. There was something in his eyes I couldn't quite place, something tight, almost unsure. But when I frowned at him questioningly, he just shook his head and bent down to grab another shirt. Nah, I was just thinking about how long this hoodie's been sitting here, he said with a shrug. If you can't remember, it means it needs to be washed, I muttered, tossing the hoodie into the bag. Benny chuckled. Less judgment, more cleaning, my friend. It went on like that for about an hour, Benny teasing, me groaning, and the two of us laughing between complaints. By the time the washing machine started whirring, my arms were tired, but at least the floor was visible again. We collapsed in the living room, and Benny tossed me a packet of chips. Think fast, he shouted. The packet hit me square in the face. Perfect aim, he said proudly, dropping onto the couch beside me. Unbelievable, I muttered, turning on his PlayStation. We played for hours. Benny, as always, was loud and animated, shouting when he scored and groaning dramatically when he lost. He never failed to make the whole experience fun. But after a while, something changed. By the third round, Benny had gone quiet. He'd glance at me every few minutes, then look away quickly. By the fourth game, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Okay, Benny, what's going on? I asked, pausing the game. You've been looking at me weird for the past hour. Huh, he said, blinking quickly as if I'd caught him off guard. Oh, it's nothing really. Don't worry about it. Benny, I said, turning toward him fully. He hesitated, his leg bouncing nervously. For a moment, he looked like he was having an internal debate. Then, after a deep breath, he spoke. Wes, we've been friends for a long time, right? Yeah, I said slowly. Since forever. And I've told you I've always got your back, right? Right, I said again, now growing curious. Benny, where is this going? He rubbed the back of his neck, glancing at me with an almost guilty expression. I saw something, he said carefully. My stomach dropped. He swallowed hard. The other day, after everything that happened with Sophia, I saw you and, please no. In the storeroom, he continued, behind the pool. My heart stopped. He looked at me with a mixture of confusion and hurt. You and Nico. Oh. That was the only sound that left my mouth. Benny's words echoed in my head, only drowned out by the pounding of my heartbeat. Everything seemed to stand still as he fidgeted with his hands, coughing awkwardly before sneaking a cautious glance at me to gauge my reaction. He wasn't angry or relieved, just unsure, while I sat there, legs crossed, eyes fixed anywhere but on him. He saw us. He saw me and Nico. He knew. Oh no. He knew everything. Yeah, but Wes, you don't, I interrupted, my voice cracking as I turned to Benny. Please, just don't. My throat tightened, my eyes stung, and my lower lip trembled as I fought back tears. My chest rose and fell rapidly, shallow breaths scraping against my throat as my vision began to blur. Breathe, just breathe, I told myself. Hey, Wes, calm down, Benny said softly, worry etched in his voice as he leaned forward, his arms half raised like he wasn't sure if he should touch me. He knows. He really knows. My chest ached, my thoughts clouded, and the room seemed to spin. I tried to breathe, but the air refused to stay steady. The tears I'd been holding back finally spilled over as I hunched forward, trembling, hands on the ground. My body shook with each uneven sob that escaped my throat. Oh man, I barely heard Benny mutter through the ringing in my ears. Wes, hey, it's okay, Benny said quickly, his voice laced with panic. His hands hovered near me, unsure, before he finally placed them gently on my shoulders, giving them a reassuring squeeze. It's okay, Wes. Just breathe. You're fine. I promise. I tried to follow his words, slowly forcing my body to relax. The air whistled through my throat as I took deeper breaths, wiping my tears with the back of my hand. Benny's hand moved to my back, giving it a few awkward pats, but somehow that simple gesture helped. Wes, you good now? He asked carefully. Sniffling, I wiped my face again and gave a weak laugh. I kind of feel terrible, to be honest. Benny snorted. You kind of look like it too, to be honest. I couldn't help but smile a little. Benny sighed in relief, leaning back like a weight had lifted from his shoulders. You scared me there, he said, lightly kicking my leg. Thought you were going to pass out or something. I wouldn't pass out in front of you, I said, swatting his foot away. You'd probably freak out and faint yourself. Oh, ouch, Benny joked, pretending to be offended before poking me again with his other leg. At least you're talking now and not having a meltdown. That quieted me. My gaze dropped to the ground again. Benny. Wes, he said, nudging my leg once more. It really is fine. I mean, yeah, it's a shock, definitely a shock, but it's okay. I've actually known for a while now. I just needed time to think about it. He paused, giving me a sheepish grin. And yes, before you say it, I do think sometimes. At first, yeah, it was surprising, but not in a bad way. I mean, I've known you forever. Finding out something like that about someone close to you just takes a moment to process, you know? I hesitated. So, what do you think about all of this? About the being gay thing? Or about Nico? He asked, half grinning. Both. Well, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. The first part's fine. You like who you like, that's cool with me. He chuckled at his own words. The Nico part, though? He trailed off and I froze. Oh no. What if he doesn't approve of Nico? The Nico thing is just wild, Benny finally said, throwing his hands in the air. What do you mean? I stammered. I mean, come on, Wes. Nico Beckett? That Nico Beckett. Benny exclaimed, jumping behind me to pull me into a playful headlock. How in the world did you manage that? Benny, I can't breathe. I gasped, laughing between protests. He released me only after ruffling my hair a few times, grinning ear to ear. Seriously, though, you've got to tell me how you two even started dating. I mean, the guy used to have everyone chasing after him. And now he's with you? That's crazy. Benny, you're unbelievable, I said, shaking my head but smiling despite myself. He clasped his hands together dramatically. Come on, tell me everything, man. You've been keeping secrets. For a long moment I just looked at him, relieved. He was okay with it. With everything. And for the first time in what felt like forever, maybe that was enough. At least for today. Thanks for listening to today's BL story. If it made your heart skip a beat, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Only here on BL Stories, where love knows no limits.